This area, so from the bridge all the way over to basically where the oil rigs are, and even where the oil rigs are, this is all state land. So it's State Lands Commission that owns this property. So the Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve, that is all State Lands Commission, and then they contract out to the Department of Fish and Wildlife to manage it. We do not get any funding or support from any government agency, city, county, or state. We are completely self-funded through grants, membership, donations, fundraisers, etc. So we do apply for grants through those agencies, but we currently do not have any grants with them. We have lost somewhere between 90 and 95% of our coastal wetlands in California over the last couple hundred years. Many of them have either been turned into agriculture, marinas, harbors, et cetera, you know, or the state of them is just so polluted and gross now from, you know, whatever industry that they're not able to support a healthy ecology. So we're, you know, somewhere in the 5% of healthy ecosystems that are left in California. So for birds that are migrating from Alaska and Canada, they fly down along the Pacific coast. It's called the Pacific Flyaway. It's like this giant bird freeway that flies down the west coast down to Central and South America in the summer or in the winter, and then back up in the summer. And so for those birds that are migrating, they need these places to stop and rest, just like a hotel. So if we were taking a road trip to New York and we started pulling gas stations and restaurants and hotels out along the way, you can only go so far before you run out of resources. So these kinds of stopover sites for those birds are critically important for their populations, because if they lose those spaces to go, then they can't continue their migration patterns, and then their populations go sideways. So one of the great things about Bolsa Chica is that we are mostly a saltwater marsh. So we have tide water coming in through the harbor, coming into Bolsa Chica. So right now we are at a high tide. High tide was 7 feet at 5 o'clock this morning, so we're still pretty high right now. So we get a lot of birds that come into Bolsa Chica that migrate here during the wintertime, and they utilize this area for rest and for resource. The white birds that we see out there, kind of little puffy ones that are along the side, are snowy egrets. Those ones are locals. They kind of stay here all year round. The black ones that are kind of cruising out to the middle right now, they have that real long beak. Those ones are cormorants. So cormorants, they're a fishing bird. Sometimes you'll see them kind of sitting on the end of a post or a pier piling or something like that. They'll stretch their wings out really big. They kind of look like a pterodactyl. At the end of the day, we can get up to 30,000 individual birds in Bolsa Chica during the winter months when migration is at its heights. Individual species, over 200 different species of birds. We have a couple great blue herons. These are some of the largest birds that we have in Bolsa Chica. They stand about 3.5 feet tall. They got about 6 foot wingspan. They'll eat just about anything that they can get down their throat. So as the tide's coming in, we also have fish that are coming in. So we also get sea turtles that come in here. But lots of different fish that will kind of come in with the tide, use Bolsa Chica as kind of an area of protection and also for food. When the tide is low, you can kind of see along the bluff over there, kind of the different levels and zones that we have. But in the mud, that's where we have the majority of the productivity that's happening here. We have so many different kinds of worms and shellfish and snails and mollusks and things that are living in the mud, that it's helped supporting a vast ecosystem above the mud. So during high tide, when everything is underwater, then we have fish that are coming in that are feeding on all those worms and snails and crabs and things that are living in the mud. And then during low tide, when the water is out, then the birds come in. You get all your shorebirds, all of your curlews and willets and things that are coming in and picking into that mud and picking on those things too. So all of those animals that live in the mud never get a break. It's either feeding time when it's high tide or feeding time when it's low tide, but that's why there are so many of them. And it's just giant buffet here for fish and birds alike. But without those organisms, this whole system would be in jeopardy. All of this brown that you see back here, that is all dried mustard. So what we were saying on the way over is that the mustard, when it's not in season, so when it'll start popping up and turning green and yellow in the spring with the rains, but during the dry season, it goes dormant, and then it's just this dry, brittle, sticky plant out there. And it's kind of referred to as a flashy fuel. So we don't do just habitat plant restoration on land, but we also do it in the water. So eelgrass is one of the native marine grasses that grows underwater, and it's a critical species to help fish and sea turtles and crabs and things like that are in the water. It produces essentially like an underwater meadow is what that plant is good for. And so we work with organizations like Orange County Coastkeeper that will come in and do eelgrass restoration within Bolsa Chica. When they did the opening of the tidal inlet, the state invested into restoring eelgrass within Bolsa Chica Bay. And I can't remember the numbers of how much they put in versus how much we have now, but needless to say, it's expanded four times what they originally put in back in the late 90s. So it has really grown out, and that plant really helps to stabilize kind of the bottom of the bay and then create ecosystem habitat for many different animals. So restoring cordgrass, so that's another plant that we have in the marine system that grows kind of tall, kind of like cattails almost. And that plant is a plant that an endangered bird, the Ridgway's rail, uses for its nesting material. And so without that plant in this area, the Ridgway's rail population starts to decline. A couple hundred years ago, before there was a highway, before there was a parking lot, before anything was here, this is very much a natural system where you have this sand dune habitat that is right on the beach that would then merge into this saltwater marsh habitat and then into this uplands terrestrial habitat here. So it's all one flowing system. There's no fence or partitions or blockages between these systems, yet we've created these boundaries as humans because we've put this giant highway right through the middle of this system, and we've created fences and we've created boundaries with housing developments. And so we've made these boundaries, and then we get upset when nature doesn't follow those boundaries. But the California sagebrush, it has a little nickname of cowboy cologne, and the story is that in the Wild West, you'd be, driving your cattle out on trail for a while. Maybe you haven't had a bath in a month, starting to smell a little ripe. The cowboys would take this, rub it on their body, kind of freshen up a little bit, give them a little bit of scent other than cowboy. So this area here is the remnant footprint of the Bolsa Chica Gun Club that existed here. But over the 100 years that it existed here, it was a hub for all the rich people in Southern California that came from Pasadena down to Huntington, from LA into Huntington. It was the premier vacation place to come and shoot some ducks and smoke some cigars and drink some whiskey and talk politics. So, but it did have a major impact on the environment here because freshwater ducks apparently taste better than saltwater ducks. And so the tide gates over here was kind of created where to dam off this the pools over there. So it created a freshwater pond for freshwater ducks. So the hunters that would come here would be able to hunt more freshwater ducks and less saltwater ducks. And so it kind of changed the ecosystem. And so when they opened that tidal inlet back up, it hadn't been opened in over 100 years. When they opened that back up, I think that was 2006, if I'm not mistaken, when they opened that tidal inlet back up. It's the first saltwater that had been in this system in over 100 years, and it started to turn the system back right side up again. So. But then we also had efforts here in World War II as a military base. So kind of over on the other side there, you can still see the gun turret mounts over there from where we had these giant guns positioned off the coast for security reasons back in the 40s. And so this area was established as kind of a lookout for any kind of enemy warcraft or anything that might have been coming in from Japan across the Pacific Ocean into the West Coast. Nothing was ever spotted. I think there was one time where something was launched and it was a misfire. We do have some really interesting evidence of some of those early tribal communities that lived in this area. Mainly these cogstones that have been found in Bolsa Chica, which are highly interesting and intriguing to me because we do not know what their purpose was other than that it was potentially used to map out astronomical events in the sky, kind of like an observatory. So they would have taken these cogstones to represent different stars and then mapping out those star constellations on the ground to reflect what was going up in the sky and then moving them based on the seasons. And that could have indicated, you know, a whole bunch of different things, you know, different migration patterns or seasons or, you know, times of rainfall or something like that. Pretty interesting stuff, but we don't know because there's been so much human activity here for so many hundreds of years, and a lot of that has been erased over time that we may never know the full story because we don't have all the pieces to the puzzle and we may never have all those pieces. So this is our Wetlands on Wheels vehicle. We use this to go and do outreach programs at schools and community events. We also do birthday parties, so if anybody has small littles in their family that might be interested in a birthday party, we can rent that out and bring it to your house and do a tide pool touch tank in your front yard. So really cool idea.